Earth's ruthless revenge leaves the Galactic Council speechless. Part 1. The warships came without warning. One moment the sky above the colony world of Aaron's Rest was clear and full of stars. The next moment it was full of ships, 43 of them, dropping out of faster-than-light travel all at once, their hulls dark and heavy, their shapes built for one purpose and one purpose only. They did not fire. They did not need to. They simply hung there in orbit, like a fist held above a face. And that was enough. Captain Dale Harmon was on the bridge of the EFS Resolute when it happened. He was drinking his second coffee of the morning and reading a maintenance report about the ship's engine coolant system, which had been giving his engineers trouble for 3 weeks. He put the coffee down when his sensor officer said the words no captain ever wants to hear. "Sir, we have multiple contacts. Large class, not civilian." Dale looked at the screen. He counted the ships. He counted them again. Then he set the maintenance report aside and said, "All stations, Condition 1, get me a channel to Earth Command." His communications officer, Kara Sutton, was already working. She was young, maybe 26, with short brown hair and quick hands. She had been on the Resolute for 8 months, and Dale had never seen her flustered. She was not flustered now, but her jaw was set in a way that told him she understood exactly what she was looking at. "Channel open to Earth Command, sir," she said, "and we are being hailed by the lead vessel." Dale answered the hail first. The face on the screen was not human. It was wide and angular, with 4 dark eyes set in a flat face, and skin the color of old coal. The being wore armor that looked like it had been worn in many battles before this one. It did not smile. It did not greet him. It simply spoke. "I am Commander Drak Vaughn of the Vethkai Dominion. You are speaking to the commanding officer of a vessel in a claimed zone. The Vethkai Dominion has filed expansion rights under the Third Accord for this star cluster. All colony worlds in this region are hereby ordered to begin evacuation procedures. You have 1 planetary rotation to acknowledge this order and begin compliance." Dale kept his voice even. "Commander, these worlds have been settled by human citizens for 3 generations. There are 9 million people living here. You are asking them to leave their homes." Drak Vaughn looked at him the way a wall looks at a door. "I am not asking. I am informing. 1 rotation, then our operations begin." The screen went dark. Kara turned from their station. "Sir, I have Earth Command on the line." Dale picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway because there was going to be a long day ahead, and he needed something to do with his hands while he thought. "Put them through," he said. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. The Great Forum on Pelos Station, a massive circular chamber where 11 species sent their representatives to argue and decide the rules of civilized space, was called to emergency session by midday. The chamber was loud when the session opened. Several of the smaller species were already talking over each other. The Dunori, a wide and stocky people with 4 arms and a long history of watching the Vethkai take things from others, were sitting very still in the way they did when they were angry, but not ready to show it yet. The Shari representative, Counselor Yevon, stood up almost immediately and spoke about the settlement compact and how the Vethkai action violated it directly. The Vethkai ambassador, a smoother and more polished version of Drak Vaughn named Shengal, listened to all of it without changing his expression. When the room quieted enough for him to speak, he said the colony worlds had been established inside the corridor of expansion, that the corridor had never been formally closed, and that the settlement compact did not apply to territories under active expansion rights. He said it the way someone reads a shopping list. No anger, no apology, no acknowledgement that 9 million people had homes in the place he was talking about. Counselor Preth of the Dunori said, "Your people told those colonists the corridor was closed. They settled there on that basis." Shengal said, "That information was outdated. We regret the confusion." The room went loud again. Earth's representative was a woman named Grace Ellison. She had been sitting quietly through all of it. She was not young, but she was not old either. Somewhere in the middle, where a person has learned to be patient without having given up on things mattering. Her hair was dark, with gray coming in at the edges, and she had the kind of face that did not give away what it was thinking. She waited until the noise came down. Then she raised her hand. The chamber recognized her. "I would like to formally request a delay of 60 days before any relocation proceedings begin," she said. Her voice was calm, completely calm, the way water is calm before something large moves underneath it. Shen Gao looked at her. The Vethkai Dominion does not negotiate timelines. "I understand," Grace said. "I am not negotiating. I am making a formal request under Article 9 of the Council Charter. Any member species facing a displacement order is entitled to request a review period. 60 days is within the bounds of that article." Shen Gao was quiet for a moment. The chamber was watching him. 30 days, he said. "The Vethkai Dominion will allow 30 days before operations begin, not 60. This is our one and only concession." Grace wrote something on the small pad in front of her. Then she looked up and said, "Thank you." She did not say anything else. She did not argue for more time. She did not look upset. She just wrote her note and sat back in her chair. Counselor Even leaned toward her after the session was called to a brief recess. 30 days is not enough time to move 9 million people, she said quietly. Grace looked at her. "No," she agreed, "it is not." "Then what will you do?" Grace picked up her datapad and stood. "We will use the 30 days, she said simply. Even watched her walk away, and could not decide whether the human woman was very brave, or very foolish, or something else entirely that did not have a name in Even's language. Back on the Resolute, Dale Harmon stood at the viewport and looked at the 43 Vethkai warships hanging in the dark above Aaron's Rest. The planet below was blue and brown and ordinary and full of people going about their days. Farmers, doctors, children in schools, people who had lived their whole lives on that world and knew no other home. He thought about the conversation with Earth Command. The orders he had been given, the things he had been told, were already in motion. He had not known about any of it before today. Most of the fleet had not known. It had been kept that way on purpose, quiet and careful, and now he understood why. Kara Sutton came to stand beside him. "Sir," she said, "do you think they will actually wait 30 days?" Dale looked at the Vethkai ships for a long moment. "They will wait," he said. "They think they have already won. People who think they have already won are always willing to wait a little." He turned away from the viewport. "The question is what they find when the 30 days are up," he said. He did not say anything more than that, but something in the way he said it made Kara feel, for the first time since the ships appeared in the sky that morning, like maybe things were not as hopeless as they looked. She went back to her station. She had a lot of work to do. The 30 days started quietly. That was the first thing the Galactic Council noticed. There were no emergency broadcasts from Earth, no tearful speeches from colony leaders, no long lines of ships loading families and furniture and memories into cargo holds. The human colonies on the 11 worlds simply went about their days, and the silence of it was strange in a way that no one could quite explain. Counselor Yevon sent a polite inquiry to Earth's diplomatic office asking about the status of the evacuation planning. The reply came back within a few hours. It was short and professional, and said that Earth was reviewing all available options and would update the Council as needed. It was the kind of reply that told you nothing, while sounding like it told you something, and Yevon read it 3 times, trying to find more meaning in it than was there. The Denori were watching too. They had a long memory when it came to the Vethkai. They had watched the Vethkai use the same method 6 times across 2 centuries. Always the same way, always the same result. Present the legal paperwork, make the ultimatum, give a short deadline, watch the other species panic, move in when the deadline passed, It had never failed. Not once. Counselor Preth called two of his advisors into a private room on day 4 and said, "Something is wrong." His advisors asked what he meant. "The humans are not panicking," he said. "Every other species panicked. The Havari panicked. The Salundi panicked. Even the Morkai, who had a fleet, panicked. The humans are sitting there like they are waiting for a meal to be served." His advisors had no answer for that. Colonel Pete Vasquez did not sleep much during the 30 days. He was a short man with a solid build and a habit of keeping 3 different data pads running at the same time, one for logistics, one for communications, and one for what he called the overview, which was a constantly updating picture of where every piece of the operation stood at any given moment. His office at Earth Command's secondary facility in the Outer Belt smelled like coffee and recycled air, and he spent most of the 30 days inside it. He had been preparing for something like this for 11 years. Not this exact thing. He had not known it would be the Vethkai, or that it would involve 11 worlds, or that the Council would be watching. But he had known, the way people who pay close attention to history always eventually know, that the day would come when Earth needed to be ready and could not afford not to be. The production orders he signed during those 30 days were enormous. Fuel transfers that moved millions of tons of refined energy through 4 systems in less than 2 weeks. Equipment shipments that traveled on routes no civilian vessel had used in decades, because those routes had been quietly upgraded and maintained and kept clear for exactly this kind of need. Personnel orders that moved trained crews to ships that most of the fleet had not even known existed. He signed every order himself. He checked every confirmation. When something was late, he called the responsible officer directly and asked why, and then listened to the answer and fixed the problem. He was not a person who yelled. He was a person who asked questions in a very specific tone of voice that made people want very badly to have good answers. On day 7, his assistant, a young man named Aaron Webb, brought him a report from a Shari scout vessel that had passed through the edge of the colony zone and logged unusual electromagnetic readings. Pete read the report. He noted that the Shari had filed it as low priority. He set it aside and went back to his logistics screen. Good, he thought. Captain Dale Harmon received his new assignment on day 20. He was in the dock bay of Forward Station Keller when he first saw the ship. It sat in berth 14, and it was not the biggest vessel he had ever stood in front of, but it had something about it that made him stop walking and just look at it for a while. The hull was a deep non-reflective black. The lines were clean and direct, nothing decorative. It was the kind of ship that did not look like it was trying to impress anyone. His new executive officer, Cody Flynn, stood beside him with a data pad and a slightly stunned expression. Cody was tall and calm and rarely showed much reaction to things, which was why Dale noticed the stunned expression. "What am I looking at?" Dale said. "EFS Meridian," Cody said. "She was commissioned 4 months ago. Most of the fleet did not know she existed. There is a classified designation on the hull type that I do not have clearance to access fully." He paused. "I did find one unclassified note. It says the armor rating is classified because sharing it might be, quote, discouraging to potential adversaries." Dale looked at the ship for another moment. "How many like her?" he asked. Cody checked his pad. "The official manifest lists 11. There is a notation at the bottom of the manifest that says the manifest is incomplete." Dale picked up his bag. "Let us go aboard," he said. They walked up the ramp and into the ship, and as they went deeper into it, Dale noticed things, small things. The way the corridors were laid out, more efficient than standard. The weight of the blast doors, heavier than regulation required. The sound of the power systems, steady and deep, like something that had a great deal of it and was not in any rush to use it all at once. He met the crew, 260 people, all selected, all briefed at a classification level he was only now being read into. They looked at him the way a well-trained team looks at a new leader, careful, waiting, willing to give the benefit of the doubt. He told them 3 things. He told them they were going to the colony zone. He told them their job was to be present and ready. He told them that whatever happened in the next 10 days, he expected them to do their jobs without drama or panic, because that was how professionals operated. Then he went to his new command chair and sat down and looked at the screens and thought about 9 million people living their lives on 11 worlds that someone else had decided to take from them. The anger that lived in Dale Harmon was not a loud kind of anger. It was quiet and patient, and it had been sitting inside him since the moment Drac Vaughn's face appeared on the screen and spoke about 9 million homes like they were minor administrative details. He let it sit there. He would need it later. On day 26, the Vethkai fleet ran a long-range sensor sweep of the colony zone. Drac Vaughn reviewed the results personally. He was expecting to find a handful of Earth fleet vessels, probably positioned near the most populated worlds, probably broadcasting diplomatic signals. He was expecting the quiet desperation of a species that had run out of time and was making a show of resistance it could not sustain. He did not find that. What the sensors returned was unclear in ways that bothered his tactical team. There were contact signatures at the edge of the sweep range, multiple signatures, but they were not forming the standard fleet patterns his team knew how to read. The electronic profiles were unfamiliar. Some of the readings suggested hull configurations that did not match any vessel type in the Vethkai intelligence database. His tactical officer, a careful being named Vethkir, came to him with the report and stood there holding it with an expression that did not look like the expression of someone delivering routine information. "What is your analysis?" Drac Vaughn asked. Vethkir was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Commander, I do not have a reliable analysis. The data does not match our models. I would need to get closer to give you an accurate picture." Drac Vaughn looked at the sensor returns. He looked at the unclear signatures and the unfamiliar profiles, and the patterns that his very experienced tactical officer could not read. "We wait for the deadline." He told himself the data was probably a sensor anomaly. He told himself the humans were probably scrambling whatever aging ships they had available, and arranging them in formations they hoped would look impressive. He told himself that he had done this 6 times before, and it had always ended the same way. He told himself all of this, but Vethkir's expression stayed in his mind for the rest of the day, quiet and uncertain in a way he could not entirely dismiss. On the morning of the 30th day, Grace Ellison walked into the Galactic Council chamber carrying one small data card. She wore the same kind of clothes she always wore. Dark jacket, simple cut, nothing that called attention to itself. She had a cup of coffee in her other hand, and she finished it outside the chamber door before she went in, standing alone in the corridor for a moment, with her eyes closed and her breathing slow and steady. Then she went in. The chamber was full in a way it rarely was. Species that normally sent junior staff to open sessions had sent their senior representatives today. The Denori delegation was at full strength for the first time in 2 years. Even the Tessari, who lived far enough from the colony zone that this dispute should not have concerned them much, had sent Counselor Mav, their most experienced diplomat. Everyone expected a surrender of some kind. That was the assumption that had settled over the council like a fog during the 30 days. The humans would ask for more time, or they would announce a partial evacuation, or they would request the council's help in negotiating better relocation terms with the Vethkai. None of those options were good, but they were all understandable, and they all led to the same place in the end. Shengal sat in the Vethkai delegation's bench at the front of the chamber with his 2 advisors on either side of him. He looked rested and calm. He had prepared several responses, depending on what the humans asked for. He was ready for all the likely outcomes. Grace walked to the speaking floor. She put the data card on the lectern. She looked around the room once, taking her time, meeting eyes with no one in particular, but seeing everyone. Then she spoke. 30 days ago, she said, the Vethkai Dominion told 9 million human citizens that their homes were not their homes. that the worlds their grandparents built and their parents raised them on, and their children were born on, belonged to someone else, because a document written in a language those families never spoke said so. Her voice was not loud, but it carried well. We were given 30 days to begin leaving. We did not begin leaving. We will not begin leaving. The 11 colony worlds are not going to be evacuated. The people on them are not going anywhere. Shengal sat up slightly. This was not one of his prepared responses. I would like to show this council what the colony zone looks like this morning, Grace said. She inserted the data card. The display screens around the chamber activated. They showed a map of the colony zone, and around the 11 worlds, positioned in overlapping layers across the entire region, were ships. The chamber went very still. There were hundreds of them. Not the standard fleet destroyers that other species had seen at Earth's military demonstrations over the years. Not the aging patrol vessels or the diplomatic escorts. These were something different. The hulls were a deep flat black. The configurations were unfamiliar. They sat in formations that covered every approach vector to every world, with overlapping fields and no gaps that made sense as mistakes. Counselor Mav of the Tessari leaned forward in his seat and stared at the screen with his 4 fingers pressed together in front of his face, which was the Tessari expression for deep and urgent concentration. Counselor Preth of the Dunori said something quietly to his aide that the recording equipment did not fully capture, but the words sounded like a number, a very large number. What you are seeing, Grace said, is the force assigned specifically to those 11 worlds. It is not the full strength of Earth Fleet. It is the portion of Earth Fleet positioned to protect those 11 worlds. Earth has been rebuilding and expanding its military capacity for the past 14 years. We did this quietly because we had no wish to alarm anyone. We are a peaceful people. We wanted to remain that way. She looked at Shengal directly. But we read history. This council's own archives document 6 civilizations that the Vethkai Dominion displaced using the exact method used against us 30 days ago. We read those documents 14 years ago. Earth made a decision. If this ever happened to us, we would be ready. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. We are ready. The 11 worlds are under full Earth Fleet protection. Any Vethkai vessel that enters the colony zone without our authorization will be treated as a hostile incursion and responded to with full force. There will be no further negotiations about timelines. There will be no evacuation. The humans living on those worlds are staying in their homes. She picked up the data card from the lectern. That is our statement. She walked back to her seat. For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. It was not the usual silence of a room waiting for what comes next. It was the silence of a room that needed time to understand what had just happened. Shengal stared at the display screens. His advisors were both very still. He looked at the ships on the map, and his mind, which was a trained and experienced diplomatic mind, began working through the implications rapidly, and did not arrive at any comfortable place. Counselor Yevon, sitting 2 rows behind the Vethkai bench, watched Shengal's face very carefully. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had learned to read faces across 11 species. What she saw on Shengal's face right now was not what she had expected. It was not anger. It was not calculation. It was something rawer than either of those things. It looked, Yevon thought, like the expression of a person who has just stepped onto ground they believed was solid, and felt it move beneath them. Counselor Preth finally broke the silence. He did not address Grace. He did not address Shengal. He just spoke into the open chamber in his low, steady voice. Those hull configurations, he said. I do not recognize them. How long have those ships existed? Grace looked at him. Some of them have been active for 2 years. Some were commissioned more recently. The oldest program in the expansion dates back 12 years. Preth nodded slowly. He looked at the screens again. And the manifest on the display, is it complete? Grace held his gaze. No, she said simply. Preth sat back in his chair. He looked at the Vethkai delegation for a long moment, and then he looked away, and there was something in that look, a kind of finality, that told Shengal everything he needed to know about where the council stood. The session was called to recess 20 minutes later. No motions were made. No votes were taken. The display screens remained active, the map of the colony zones still showing those hundreds of ships in their careful, overlapping formations, and the representatives of 11 species stood in small groups around the chamber and spoke in low voices and kept looking at the screens. Grace sat at the human delegations table and drank water and waited. Her expression had not changed since she walked in. Whatever she was feeling, if anything, it stayed exactly where she kept it. Kara Sutton, who had traveled with her to Pelos Station and was sitting in the observer gallery above, watched the council members watching the screens, and thought about the day those 43 Vethkai ships had appeared in the sky over Aaron's Rest. She thought about how afraid she had been that morning, and how she had hidden it, and how Dale Harmon had sat in his captain's chair with his cold coffee and said that the question was what the Vethkai would find when the 30 days were up. Now she knew what they had found. She did not feel afraid anymore. Drac Vaughn received the transmission from the council chamber while sitting on the bridge of his flagship. He had been waiting for the human representative's statement, the same way he had waited at the end of every other operation, patiently, certain of the outcome. He had done this 6 times, and each time the species on the other side had done the same thing, which was make a show of resistance, say some words about their rights and their history, and then fold when they understood that the math did not work in their favor. It always came down to math in the end. Ships and weapons and the cold arithmetic of power. He watched the transmission from beginning to end without speaking. When it was done, he said, "Show me the sensor data from the colony zone." His crew brought it up on the main display. What he saw matched what Grace Ellison had shown the council chamber. Hundreds of ships, unknown hull types, formation patterns his tactical team had not seen before. Coverage so complete and overlapping that every approach to every colony world would require fighting through multiple layers of defense simultaneously. He did not say anything for a long time. Veth Kier came to stand beside him. She was his best tactical officer, and she had been his tactical officer for 9 years, and she knew when to speak and when to wait. She waited now. She had her own analysis ready, but she did not offer it until he asked. "Give me the engagement models," he said. She put them on the screen beside the fleet display. The numbers were laid out clearly, the way bad news is always clearest when it is organized and presented without softening. 3 different approach scenarios, 3 different sets of projected outcomes. All 3 of them pointed to the same place. Our losses in any direct engagement scenario are between 40 and 60% before we reach the first defensive layer, Veth Kier said. That is based on what we can identify from sensor data. We have not been able to classify approximately 1/3 of the vessel types present. Their weapons profiles are unknown. Their armor ratings are unknown. The models for those vessels are based on assumptions, not data. Drac Vaughn looked at the numbers. "What happens if those assumptions are wrong?" he said. "If the unclassified vessels perform above our modeled estimate, the loss projections increase significantly," Veth Kier said. Her voice stayed flat and professional. "In the worst-case scenario, the models do not reach a successful outcome under any approach configuration we have tested." Drac Vaughn was quiet. He looked at the fleet display. He thought about the 6 previous operations. He thought about the Havari, who had 3 cruisers and a handful of fighters, and had sent them all out to resist and lost them all in the first 4 hours. He thought about the Morokai, who had a real fleet and real courage, and had still broken under 2 days of sustained pressure because they ran out of reserves and had no plan beyond the first engagement. The humans had a plan. That was the thing that sat in his chest like a cold stone. They had been planning for this for 14 years, quietly, without telling anyone, building things no one knew about, maintaining routes no one was watching, training crews for ships that did not officially exist. He had walked into this expecting a species that had 30 days to scramble, He had found a species that had used the 30 days to show him what 14 years of preparation looked like. "What about their reserves?" he said. The human woman said the display was not their full fleet. She said it was the force assigned specifically to those 11 worlds. Vethkir nodded once. "I have no data on reserve strength. We have no intelligence on what they may be holding back, or where it is positioned." Drak Von looked at the display for another long moment. The ships sat there in their careful formations, still and quiet, doing nothing except existing in large numbers, in exactly the right places. That was the most effective kind of threat. Not aggression, just presence. Undeniable, prepared, patient presence. He thought about the council chamber. He thought about the other species, watching those screens. He thought about the 6 previous operations, and how each one had added to the Vethkai reputation for careful and unstoppable expansion. And he thought about what this moment would add to that same reputation if the next thing that happened was a costly and unsuccessful assault on a fleet that had been specifically built to stop him. He thought about the records. He thought about how historians write about the first time something fails. "Contact the council," he said. Vethkir looked at him. "Tell them the Vethkai Dominion is prepared to enter into a formal review of the classification status of the corridor of expansion. Tell them we are open to discussions about the legal framework of the expansion rights filing. Tell them we acknowledge the complexity of the situation and wish to pursue a diplomatic resolution." Vethkir was still for a moment. "Commander, that is a withdrawal." "It is a request for dialogue," Drak Von said. His voice was flat and gave nothing away. "Those are not the same thing." Vethkir said nothing more. She went to her station and began composing the message. Drak Von looked at the fleet display one last time. He looked at the ships he could not identify, and the formations he could not predict, and the reserves he had no data on. And he made the decision that any person makes when they finally understand that the ground beneath them is not what they thought it was. He stepped back. The message from the Vethkai fleet reached the council chamber during the recess. Shengal read it on a private screen at the delegation bench. His advisors read it over his shoulder. All 3 of them were quiet for a moment. Then Shengal stood up and walked across the chamber to the human delegation's table. Grace Ellison looked up at him when he arrived. She did not stand. She waited. "The Vethkai Dominion," Shengal said carefully, "is willing to enter into a formal review of the legal standing of the expansion rights filing. We acknowledge there may be grounds for a classification dispute regarding the corridor." Grace looked at him for a moment. "A review with what starting position?" she said. Shengal was quiet briefly. "A starting position of mutual acknowledgement that the human colonies have established historical residence on the 11 worlds in question." Grace nodded once. "We will participate in the review." She did not smile. She did not look satisfied. She just nodded, the way a person nods when something goes the way it was always going to go, if everyone involved was sensible enough to see it. Shengal stood there for a moment longer. He had a question that was not a diplomatic question, and should not have been asked in a chamber full of observers. But he asked it anyway, because he had been a diplomat for a long time, and the thing he most valued was understanding things accurately. "The 14 years, he said. "Was it always going to be us?" Grace thought about this honestly. "We did not know it would be you specifically," she said. "We knew it would be someone. Your Dominion's history made you the most likely candidate." Shengal absorbed this. "And if we had not filed the expansion rights claim, if we had left your colonies alone, then no one would ever have known how many ships we had," Grace said. "That would have been fine with us." Shengal looked at her for one more moment. Then he went back to his bench. Councillor Preth had watched the exchange from across the chamber. When Shengal sat down, Preth looked at his aide and said quietly, "The humans built a weapon and then put it away and hoped they would never need it. And when they needed it, they used it once, cleanly, without a single shot being fired." His aide said, "Is that not what every species hopes to do?" Preth thought about the 6 civilizations that had lost their homes to the Vethkai. He thought about what it would have taken for any of them to be standing where Grace Ellison stood today. Yes, he said, but the humans actually did it. The official resolution was filed 6 weeks after the 30th day. It was written in the formal language of the Galactic Council, which was dry and precise and stripped of any emotion, the way official documents always are. It stated that the Vethkai Dominion had withdrawn its expansion rights filing for the 11 colony worlds following a joint review of the Corridor of Expansion classification. It stated that Earth and the Vethkai Dominion had agreed to enter into a normalization framework. It used the phrase mutually agreeable resolution 4 times in 12 paragraphs. It said nothing about the ships. It said nothing about 14 years of quiet preparation. It said nothing about the look on Shen Gao's face when the display screens came to life in the council chamber. Official documents never record the moments that actually matter. But the species that had been in that chamber remembered. Dale Harmon stood on the bridge of the EFS Meridian and watched the Vethkai fleet leave. They went slowly, which he thought was interesting. 43 ships that had arrived like a fist dropping from the sky left one by one, in a long and orderly line, each one moving out to jump distance before disappearing into the bright fold of faster-than-light travel. It took the better part of an hour. Dale watched all of it. Cody Flynn stood beside him. After the last ship vanished, Cody said, "How do you feel?" Dale thought about it. "Tired," he said. "Good tired, though." "Do you think they will come back?" Dale looked at the place where the last Vethkai ship had been. Empty space now, ordinary and dark. "Not them," he said. "Not for a long time. They will need years to rebuild the story they tell about themselves. The Vethkai spent 2 centuries being the species that always wins. They are going to spend some time figuring out what they are now." Cody nodded. He looked at his datapad. "We have new orders from Earth Command. We are being reassigned to the outer patrol route after a 30-day maintenance window. The coolant system still needs fixing." Cody looked at him. "We just held off a 43-ship fleet without firing a weapon, and you are thinking about the coolant system?" Dale sat down in his chair. "The fleet held off 43 ships. I still have a leaking coolant system. One of those things is my problem to solve." Cody smiled and went back to his station. On Aaron's Rest, a farmer named Roy Cutler stood in his field and looked up at the sky the way he had looked up at it every morning for the past 30 days, watching for shadows that should not be there. The sky was clear, blue and bright and full of ordinary clouds moving in from the west, bringing the kind of slow rain that was good for the soil. He had a daughter named June, who was 7 years old and had not fully understood what the last 30 days meant. Only that the adults around her had been quieter than usual, and that her father had spent a lot of evenings standing on the porch, looking at nothing in particular. She came out of the house now and stood beside him in the field and looked up at the same sky he was looking at. "Is it over?" she asked. Roy thought about the right way to answer that. He thought about what it meant for something like this to be over. He thought about the ships he would never see, the ones that had been there the whole time, quiet and ready in the dark between the stars. "For now," he said. June considered this with the seriousness that 7-year-olds bring to things that the adults around them treat as important. "Will they come back?" she said. "Maybe someday," Roy said, "but by then we will be ready again." June seemed to find this satisfying. She went back inside to have breakfast. Roy stood in the field a little longer, feeling the cool morning air and the smell of rain coming and the solid ground under his boots, and he felt something that was hard to put into words, but was something like gratitude. Not for the ships or the military or the diplomats, though he was grateful for all of those things too. Mostly, he was grateful for the ground itself, for the fact that it was still his ground, that he could stand on it and feel it under him, the way his father had stood on it, and his father's father before that. He went back inside too. There was work to do. In a small room off the main council chamber on Pelos Station, 4 senior council members met privately on the evening after the resolution was filed. There was Councillor Preth of the Dunori, heavy and quiet, sitting with his forearms folded. There was Councillor Mav of the Tesseri, long-limbed and careful, turning a stylus over in his fingers. There was Councillor Yevon of the Shari, with her pale, worried face that was a little less worried than it had been 30 days ago. And there was Lou Garrett, who was human, and had worked council relations for 23 years, and had been invited specifically because the others wanted to ask him things they could not comfortably ask Grace Ellison. They talked for 2 hours. Preth asked the question first. How long has Earth been capable of this? Lou thought about it. The current level of capability, meaning what you saw on those display screens, has been building for about 14 years. The decision to build it was made after the Morokai displacement. Earth watched what happened to the Morokai and the council that was supposed to protect them, and Earth made a decision. What decision? Yevon asked. That the rules are only as good as the force behind them, Lou said. The Morokai trusted the rules. The rules did not save them. Earth decided it needed something more reliable than rules. Mav turned the stylus over one more time. You are saying Earth stopped trusting us. Lou looked at him honestly. Earth stopped trusting that trust was enough, he said. That is not the same thing. Yevon was quiet for a moment. Why did you not tell the council? We could have helped. We could have made a joint response, a combined fleet. Could you have? Lou said. He did not say it unkindly. The Dunori had watched the Vethkai move 6 civilizations off their worlds across 2 centuries. Not one of those times did the council stop it. Every time there were meetings and statements and expressions of concern. The Vethkai filed their paperwork, gave their deadlines, and moved in when the time was up. The council recorded it all very thoroughly. The room was quiet. Earth did not want a joint statement, Lou said. Earth wanted the Vethkai to look at something and decide it was not worth the cost. That required something specific. Not size, not noise, certainty. The kind of certainty that only comes from numbers that cannot be argued with. Preth said, and the ships we did not see on the display, the ones the human woman implied were being held back. Lou said nothing. Preth watched him for a moment. Are there really more? Lou picked up his cup and drank from it and set it back down. I am not cleared to discuss force disposition, he said pleasantly. The room was quiet again. Mav set down his stylus. You know what the most remarkable thing is, Mav said finally. They did all of this and they are still here, sitting at the council table, filing their reports, attending their sessions. They built something capable of ending this dispute in hours, and they chose to end it with a data card and a calm voice in a chamber full of witnesses. That was always the plan, Lou said. Show it once, use it to stop something, then put it away, and go back to being neighbors. Yevon looked at him. And if someone else decides to test it? Lou was quiet for a moment. Outside the small room, the station hummed with its usual sounds. Life going on in all directions, across hundreds of species and thousands of worlds. The ordinary business of a complicated galaxy. Then they will find out, he said, that the plan works more than once. Grace Ellison sat alone in her office late that night and looked at the stars through the wide viewport. The coffee Kara had brought her an hour ago had gone cold. She did not drink it. She thought about 14 years. She thought about the meetings, and the budget arguments, and the people who had said it was excessive, and the people who had said it was paranoid, and the people who had asked what they were really preparing for, and whether they were sure it would ever come to anything. She thought about Roy Cutler standing in his field on Aaron's Rest, though she had never met him and did not know his name. She thought about all the people like him, 9 million of them across 11 worlds, who had gone to bed on the 30th day in the same homes they had gone to bed in every night before it. She thought about the 6 civilizations that did not have that. Then she stopped thinking about all of it, because there was nothing left to think about that needed thinking tonight. The work was not finished, it was never finished, but this part of it was done. She had carried it carefully for a long time, and now she can set it down, just for one night, and let the stars be stars and the silence be silence. She looked out at the dark and the light scattered through it, and she felt quietly and without ceremony at peace. Tomorrow there would be more work, there always was. But tonight the 9 million people were in their homes, and the homes were still there, and that was enough.